Hello and welcome to another episode of Honda Street Garage. We're going to be continuing the prep install today on the B20 Vtec and all that kind of jazz, so stay tuned, stick around. Before we continue, I want to go ahead and say click subscribe, click like. If you haven't seen the new shirts, go to www.hondastreetgarage.bandcamp.com and order a new shirt or hoodie because they're really cool and they're selling pretty quick. Also, another announcement, I'm going to be in California at the Chronicles 8 meet in Corona, California, the 29th of October. Any subscribers that are in that area, come out and see us. So now I'm going to throw some gloves on and get started. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and get the trans off the block and separate that, and then we're going to take the clutch and flywheel off. All right, we're going to take the half shaft off. She's missing a bolt. So this should pop down and slide out. Okay, next we have to take the starter off. Okay. And now we have our transmission separated. The things I'm going to do is remove as much as I can, clean it up. Dirty transmission, meet brake cleaner. Be back in a minute. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what 4 cans of brake cleaner will do to a dirty transmission. But I think we're going to take it another step further. VHT header flameproof flat aluminum. It's going to come out a little shiny at first, but it will dry a beautiful flat. And here's our tranny finished. Looks good, nice and clean, nice and fresh. Now we're going to remove the AC bracket, the power steering bracket off this, as well as we have to use the post mount off of this block. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all that stuff. And I've already broke this bolt loose. This timing cover off. Hide in there. Now there's 3 14mm bolts holding this guy on. Now we need to take the clutch and flywheel off. Now on this flywheel, you need what they call a 12-pointed socket. Clutch doesn't look too bad. Now we're gonna need to use this flywheel and also these bolts. All right, update. So right now we don't have the right socket to get the flywheel off. We'll get what we need tomorrow at the store, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to make some headway on tearing down the B20 a little bit. Here's our B20, and this is usually what you'll get from an engine importer. It'll kind of have everything. This one doesn't have the AC compressor, but it doesn't matter, we don't need it. Still has the power steering pump, but we don't need it. Obviously the intake manifold and the head are not going to be used, but I'm going to try to tear everything down and make some headway. Okay, thank God for snap-on impact guns. I got my 2 guns with a 10, a 12, a 14, and a 17, and I'm just going to start drilling everything off. And it's a bit rusty. Ooh. It's even still full of oil. That's how good this motor is. I'm actually going to set this to the side. This is a newer style, so it doesn't really have a whole lot of studs. It only has 2 studs. It doesn't have a whole lot of studs, it just has bolts. Okay, I've got all those bolts off now. So here's pretty much our deconstructed B20. Took me about 30 minutes to get everything off. This intake manifold to get off was a pain. But pretty much, as you can see, I just stripped off all the hoses, the intake manifold, just to make things generally easier. I mean, pretty straightforward. It's just undo bolts. Now this right here is the box of stuff that came off of the B20 that is pretty much unusable. Now the one thing I would caution anybody who buys a JDM motor is to understand that most likely in shipping, you're going to have to probably purchase a new throttle body or sensors, because 9 times out of 10 the TPS and the map sensor get destroyed. It's just kind of completely destroyed. But just keep that in mind when purchasing an engine. H Motors Online guarantees all sensors safe. They take them off for shipping. Now comes the worst moment of all engine swaps. Loosening the crank pulley bolt. Now when you do an engine swap, it's always best to change the timing belt and water pump. In this case we have to because of the differences in the timing belt. So getting this crank pulley bolt off, you're gonna need a high impact gun, air, battery powered. We're gonna see if this battery powered gun can take it off. Oh, miracle heaven above. Well, you have this crank bolt here. Do not lose any of these because they're very important. Now, when we take this off, you'll notice this little Woodruff key right here. That is very important. Do not lose that. I like to set it down in there so it doesn't get lost. Okay, timing belt top half has been removed. Oh, wow. Grab the proper one right here. Now, something like this, make sure we hand thread these bolts in. She is on there. We're gonna get back at it in the morning, get all this stuff put back together and get it in the car. Okay guys, the next day, we are continuing putting our B20 together. We're gonna try to get the flywheel off of the old block. We need to use the flywheel and the flywheel bolts. So keep that in mind when you're using a B20. Now we're going to start the process of taking the head off of the B20. The first thing we're going to do is remove this valve cover. You have 7 valve cover bolts and they're all 10 millimeter. I've gone ahead and removed those. That's a good OEM gasket right there. All right, now with these heads, it's actually, I think it's a little more complicated than the Vtec heads. You have to remove all these cam caps to get to the head bolts, and it just seems to be a little more labor intensive, I think. So the first thing we're gonna do is loosen the timing belt tensioner here, which is a 14 millimeter. That'll loosen up the timing belt. We'll get that off. Pull the belt off of the cam gears. Like that. And we're not gonna need this timing belt anymore. Now the next step is to get all these cam cap bolts off, and they're all 10 millimeters, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit that. We'll speed this one up. Now this is why I say it's a little more labor intensive, because the camshaft caps don't really just come off like the Vtec ones do. You kind of work them off. Usually the best thing to do is kind of maybe throw a little screwdriver in there and kind of wiggle them just a little bit. Be nice, be gentle. Okay, as you can see, I've removed all the bolts here. I've got a little screwdriver here. I'm using the valve cover as like a little parts tray to catch everything. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this screwdriver, kind of wiggle it back and forth until voila. Okay, now we can see all the head bolts exposed. A little tip, if you plan on reusing this head, do not get these mixed up. Don't let them move, if you can help it. Now we can also remove our upper timing cover. We just have the head exposed, ready to come off. Now we're gonna go ahead and take these head bolts off with this big bad gun. Now the head should be removable. Nothing attached, just double check. And just like that, we have exposed our B20 block. Aww. I'm gonna clean her up and then get ready to put this head on. I'm gonna take a rag and a little bit of brake cleaner. I'm gonna spray the rag and just wipe this surface of the block down. Get it as clean as I can. Now I've been cleaning this guy up for a little bit. You can tell I've done one cylinder 4 and 1. I've cleaned those up really nice. They're super clean, getting all the carbon buildup off of them. Just, you don't really have to do this, but you know, I just like to do it just to keep it clean. Now I'm gonna move on to cylinder. Just basically with a little rag, a little bit of brake cleaner. Be very sparingly with it. Try not to get it down into the cylinder walls. We're definitely gonna do an oil change before we do anything, start the motor, anything like that. So continuing on. Basically, I get my rag wet and I just wipe. I mean, you can see that it's already starting to come off. I'm gonna get busy on this. Okay, these are our finished products. Cleaning it up. So we got a basically off-the-shelf head gasket here for a B20. Basically, it only goes on one way. I'm gonna be very careful with these. Don't bend them. We're just gonna set this down on top, like this. Now we've got the little up symbol right here. We're gonna get our dowel pins. Now these are not your typical LS Vtec dowel pins because the head has been drilled out. So normally if you get an LS Vtec kit, you'll get dowel pins that are step down from I think 14 millimeter to 12 millimeter. Anyway, this head has already been drilled out. It's kind of the old school way of doing it. It's before they made the step down dowel pins. We're going to make sure that they fit over the dowel pins. And they do. Now the dowel pins are there to make sure the head lines up and sits where it should. Also, a quick little note, if you notice cylinder 1 and cylinder 4 are all the way up, this is what they call top dead center. So that way, when I go to put the head on and put the timing belt on, the block will already be relatively close to top dead center. Okay, now, so here's the head. Now, the head has been plugged already, which is right there, and the dowel pins have already been drilled out. Now, if you want to know how to prep a head, we already have a video on that. I'm going to put the link in the description and also the episode number, how to LS Vtec in the summer, something like that. Basically, we prep the head in that video. You can see here that the oil line has already been tapped there. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this clean, and then we're gonna get ready to mount it on together. Okay, so there we go, Gucci. She's on there. Now, take our head bolts. Everyone is going to be screaming at the camera right now because everybody's going to say, why aren't you using ARP head bolts? And this is a budget build. We're not boosting anything. But what we're going to do, dip them in oil. This is the one thing I don't know.
I found you on Street Road.
All right, that's all right, we're doing the torque specs, 22 and 61. Go ahead and type your arguments now. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what you call a B20 Vtec. Now we're gonna clean it up, paint it like the tranny. And we're gonna put the flywheel on. Now we're gonna torque it down, put the clutch on, and then transmission. Okay, so this is where we stand with the engine. We got the flywheel and clutch on. We cannot get the transmission on because at the moment we don't have a clutch alignment tool. It's in another shop that's locked up. We'll get it tomorrow. But I'm gonna go ahead and assemble the head, put the timing belt water pump on. My battery's dying, so I'm gonna get as much footage as I can. I'm gonna use a little bit of Lucas oil stabilizer. Just gonna put it on like this. Set the intake cam facing up, exhaust cam. Same thing. This was number 3. We set that in the middle. Number 4. Forgot to do something. Now the torque specs are 20 pounds, and then the 10 millimeters are 8 pounds. So the battery's dying. I'm gonna go ahead and charge it while I torque these. You've seen us do this before, so catch up with you in a minute. So here we have our motor here, and it's time for a new water pump. Now the reason why it's time for a new water pump is, of course you want to go ahead and do one while doing a timing belt, but there's another reason. If you look close, it says 19 teeth. What that means is it's got 19 teeth. Now the Vtec motors actually have 22 teeth, and the B20, because of the cooling ports, definitely need the 22 teeth water pump, especially for the timing belt to match up and everything. So we have a new one. I have removed the engine mount just to make things a little easier to see and easier to get to. Oh, and there she goes, ruining our nice pretty paint. Look how clean that is from a JDM motor. Battery's dying again. So here we go. We're gonna put it on. What's this short bolt? Short bolt. Considerably bigger. Now we're going to time up the block, we're going to time up the cams, and we're going to put the new timing belt on. I have my 2 cam marks facing up, but what's more important is that if you notice the 2 lines right here are literally level with the head, facing each other. And then this guy down here is facing straight up, but also there's a little mark here and an arrow here. So now we're going to put the belt on. Okay, do you notice that? Did you notice all this move? Hopefully. So now I'm going to slide the belt on. Notice there's a bunch of floppy stuff here. So what we do is we take the crank, make sure the time belt's on, and we rotate 3 teeth. So 1, 2, 3. And if you notice, it's tight up here, it's tight right here, but all the slack's over here where the tensioner side is before the battery dies. And now our motor is perfectly timed, tension's everywhere, but just to be sure, we're going to rotate it all the way around and make sure our timing marks still line up. Okay, so believe it or not, I've actually just rotated the motor around a few times, and sure enough, our timing marks are lined up there, facing up, and our alignment marks are dead on. And that is how you time a dual overhead cam Vtec motor. We need to go ahead and put the driver's side mount bracket on. Little spin wheel here, this little protector thing, it's gonna go on. All right. Now one of the most important thing, so you don't shear any crank pulleys, is the Woodruff key. Okay, we're gonna put this guy on very carefully. Yep. Okay, one of the things that I did while I was recharging the battery was I had to tie up some of the coolant lines because the B20 water neck doesn't have a return. I had to replace it with the B16, B18 water neck head where the thermostat housing is. The thermostat housing. So I'll show you what it did. So coolant lines run out of this water pipe here, out of here, in to the air out of control valve, out of the air out of control valve into the throttle body, out of the throttle body, back into the, I don't know if you can see it here, back into the thermostat housing. Now the B20 doesn't have that. It has a different return system. So in order to make this work like it should, we had to swap that out. So we're gonna wrap it up for tonight. Tomorrow we're gonna get back at it and start this thing.